Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. President Jonathan hands over licenses to PHCN successor companies, says things will get better from now on. PHCN workers threaten to stop new owners from taking over power facilities. Protest handover across the country. The challenge of national security is our focus tonight as we continue our series on assessment of the nation's performance since independence, and at least 50 people killed in multiple car bomb blasts in Baghdad, the Iraqi capital. Well, do remember that we have a number of ways for you to keep up with all our top stories. There's the website channelstv.com and on youtube.com/channelsweb. Now, if you're on the go, please visit m.channelstv.com to view us live on an iPad, iPhone or BlackBerry. And you can also download the Channels TV app for Android and Nokia 920 from their respective stores. Now, as part of the 53rd Independence Anniversary, the President will address the nation at 7 a.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, October the 1st, 2013. President Jonathan's Special Advisor on Media and Publicity, Dr. Ruben Abati, said the address will be broadcast on all radio and television stations in the country, including here on Channels Television. The broadcast is expected to touch on national security, the economy, and national unity, among other pertinent national issues. The President had yesterday, in a media chat, said that this year's independence anniversary will be low-key. So do tune into Channels Television and other networks as we bring to you the President's broadcast, which will be at 7 a.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, October the 1st, 2013. Now, the problem of insecurity has been one of the challenges Nigeria's had to confront right from independence in 1960. However, over this year's challenge has not only persisted, but also assumed a frightening dimension as the nation now grapples with kidnapping, ethnic, communal and religious conflicts, and more recently, terrorism. Today, our focus on Nigeria's 53rd Independence Anniversary. We chronicle the nation's security challenges and seek a way out of the predicament.
1st October 2010. On this day, the first set of explosives were detonated in Abuja during the 50th Independence Anniversary. President Goodluck Jonathan and dignitaries from around the world were in attendance. A dozen people were killed and about 2 dozens injured. Barely 2 months later, on the eve of year 2011, another explosion rocked a bear garden and mini market at a military cantonment popularly known as Abacha Barracks in Abuja, leaving 30 dead and scores critically injured. These 2 bomb blasts in 2010 opened up a new era of bombings through 2011 and 2012 in the federal capital and across the northern part of the country. Some were credited to the Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta, MEND, and majority in the later stages to the Islamic sect Boko Haram.
The effect is much on me because in that incident, I lost 2 of my daughters. My husband burned, my daughter Lillian burned, Richard Idike burned, Emmanuel Idike burned. Then 2 was left with me.
Gabriel Abu is 17 years old. He was 15 when he was caught up in a bomb explosion at the Mogadishu cantonment on the last day of 2010. Besides other injuries, he lost a limb and is now stuck with an artificial limb that is fast deteriorating.
They employed me for school. But this is just 2 things that I know from my treatment in the school.
From the United Nations bombing in August 2011, which left 23 dead and 129 injured, and the Manila bombing in December of same year with some 40 persons dead and over 50 injured, are Clement Obi and Ebuka Obiako, who both lost their left eyes.
The worst painful part of it is after the bomb blast and the other thing, them abandoned so many of us in the hospital.
I have to go under or through others surgeries so that the eye will not get rupture.
One thing that remains constant for all these victims, however, is unfulfilled promises by the federal government, which is met by unrelenting hope that good fortune will yet come their way.
We're directed to FCDA that they were the one who were to manage the treatment here in Nigeria, but when we got there, the response we got from them was not encouraging at all.
I'm begging Nigerians to help me in my children's aspect, at least in their education.
Recently, Mr. Henry Oka, the mastermind of the October 1st bombing, where 12 people died, was convicted in South Africa. But that is hardly enough, the victims say. No convictions have been made for other bombings where more than 1,000 have lost their lives in 3 years and a lot more injured and left with indelible scars. These victims are hoping that while efforts are being made to bring justice to them, government will hasten to take a fresh look into their situations, especially those who still require recurring medical checks and treatment that they cannot afford. Omelogo Nadi Channels Television News.
Well, indeed, security is our focus right now. And to discuss the state of security in the nation 53 years on, I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by a professor of criminology and former lecturer of the Ahmadu Bello University, Mr. Femi Odekunle. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us on the news at 10. Well, Professor, if you can hear me, it's really difficult to talk about security, particularly in the last 1 year, when you look at some of the lapses that have occurred and some of the death tolls that we've seen. But can you just start by telling us how you feel our leaders have fared in terms of guaranteeing the safety and security of the lives of Nigerians 53 years on?
Thank you very much. I would say if you take our leaders, or the leadership of the country, particularly from the time of the Babangida regime, and again, especially from 1999 today, the performance of our leaders in terms of achieving security and safety for the majority of our citizens has been less than optimum. Definitely there is no country that could talk about absolute security. Or absolute insecurity. You talk about something in between or midway on the scale in terms of achieving that level of security that will enable the citizens to actually go about their businesses without any fear of molestation or any fear of danger to their life or to their limb. In that case, you talk about optimum security. And nobody would like the security level of his country to slide down the scale to a situation like in Somalia or in Afghanistan or in Iraq. Now, before the middle 80s, we could say, despite the civil war, in most parts of the country, we had optimum security. But since the development of the country has been going down the drain, I'm not talking about growth. I always make this distinction between growth and development in terms of human relations. They have been reflected in terms of the security problem we are having, to the extent that our leaders can I hear?
I was just trying to cut in there to bring it back home into what's happening recently, looking at the various dimensions that of security and the way that it's going right now, looking at terrorism and the Boko Haram insurgency, because that is an aspect of security that's been quite a challenge recently. Would you say that in spite of the state of emergency declared and the other bombings that continue to happen, how would you say that this has to be tackled now?
You are too, excuse me, Ijoma, you are too fast. you are too fast for me. If you can slow down so I can get your question clearly. And before you go on, the question I was trying to answer before has to do with the extent to which our leaders are able to provide us with safety and security. And I said, even though nobody is sure of absolute security, our leaders have not been able to provide us with optimum security. And I was trying to point out that the reason is because they have not been able to achieve an optimal level of development, which would then increase the number of stakeholders who will be interested in security, peace, and progress of the country. Now, if I can get the next question, very clearly I'll be able to respond.
Now, as you've requested, but I'm going to pause you for a while to look at some of the issues that I'm talking about in terms of where security has taken us recently. And let's just stop for a while and look at that background for just a moment.
Safeguarding the sovereign, independence and territorial integrity of the Nigerian state was a central pillar of the national security policy. This was one of the reasons behind the Nigerian Civil War. Apart from the Civil War, the nation witnessed several communal, ethnic, religious and political crises. Some of those that left indelible mark on the country include the post-independence political crisis, the Nigerian Civil War, the Metisine riot in Kano, the annulment of June 12 election crisis, the Niger Delta crisis, and the Boko Haram violence. While the nation witnessed this crisis, armed robbery, burglary, and kidnapping thrived on one hand.
Of all the governments in this country, apart from the Civil War, which was fought by General Gowon, the issue of Boko Haram has been on the forefront, has been a front burner of the national discourse.
Nigeria is a nation with ethnic and religious diversity and a very rich history of constitutional development. This diversity has posed a lot of challenges to governance and manifested in the nature of security threats over the 5 decades of Nigerians' nationhood.
We are not in 2015 yet, but the agitation for who becomes the president has taken the front burner and at the same time diverted attention from government to deliver on its promises to the people.
How did these security threats come in? Politicians are the ones that introduce this insecurity in our politics. Therefore, if I may paraphrase Alhaji Gambo Jimeta, the former IGP and NSA, who said that all our security challenges are self-inflicted, and he's not far from the truth.
Looking at the trend of security threats in the country, security experts believe that Nigeria can come out of the threats. However, government and security agencies need to take urgent steps to address the trend.
If you look at the general polity, that the polity is being heated up, is a major challenge also. So we should, as we approach our anniversary, I think it's important for people to re-examine their conscience, for people to be patriotic and think Nigerian.
When they are confronted with such security challenges, they rise above board and implement training procedures and fund the security agencies adequately.
So government needs to put a proper infrastructure in place as is obtainable in current times. Funding can be done internally as the need arises. 2, before funds are released, it should be that those funds should be released to the appropriate needs.
The problems of ethnic, religious and communal conflicts constitute a serious threat to national security, and they are rooted in politics. Deliberate effort needs to be done to transfer ethnic loyalty to national loyalty. Any solution to the present security situation must consider these facts.
So, Professor, that is what I was trying to talk about in terms of the trend of security threats that we've seen in recent times. They have continued in spite of everything that's being done. How do you propose a way forward?
From the response I gave to your first question, it is clear that most security challenges are actually developmental challenges. Now, Boko Haram insurgency, just like the Niger Delta insurgency, did not start overnight. So that is why one will not be surprised that even though the government has done the right thing by declaring a state of emergency and by flooding the area with military personnel, but it cannot that could not end it overnight. Why government will continue to flood the place with military, to do all it can with internal resources and external assistance to flood the place and flush out the insurgents, it could not end overnight. Remember that despite the might of America, insurgency is still going on in Afghanistan. Insurgency is still going on in Iraq. The point I'm trying to make is that the efforts of government must be commended in terms of declaring states of emergency and trying to flood the place with soldiers and whatever. But it cannot end overnight. In the meantime, while they are doing that, they should continue to make efforts to have meaningful development. I remember about a year ago or so, or even less, the federal government started what they call Amajiri School. And they asked me what I thought of it. And I said, well, it's a good idea, but it should have started 20 years ago. So similarly, efforts now, they may not show reward of fruits, but they will, at the end of the day, make a difference 5, 10, 20 years from now. That is, at the same time, the government is doing what it can do operationally, militarily in that place. It should also think ahead in terms of meaningful development.
All right, thank you so much, Professor, for sharing your insight.
It's not an overnight affair.
Right, we hear that, and I'm going to thank you for sharing your insight with us here on the News at 10. I've been speaking with a professor of criminology and a former lecturer of the Ahmadu Bello University, Professor Femi Odekunle. We've been discussing security in the nation as it is, and as we celebrate 53 years of independence. When the News at 10 returns, Central Bank of Nigeria takes campaign on financial inclusion to secondary schools. That's on business news. Please stay with us.